Hey, fourth graders, welcome back to Reader's Workshop. I'm Mrs. Calabrese, and this week we are continuing to focus on reading strategies. Last time we were focused on visualization and creating those movies in your mind to help your comprehension and to help you understand what you have read. Today, we are going to focus on making predictions and how that also helps our comprehension. So our learning target today is I can make a prediction about what will happen next. Kids often get confused between predictions and inferencing. And readers make predictions to think about the future, like what's going to happen next in the future or next in the story. Whereas inferencing is different. Inferencing is done when we're trying to figure out what's happening now. And the author is giving us clues, but not really telling us exactly what's going on. We have to take those pieces that the author is giving us and put those pieces together to make an inference. In other words, you might say to yourself with an inference, I think this is happening right now. Whereas a prediction is, I think this is going to happen next in the future, or maybe the way the story is going to end. Okay. Whereas inferencing, and we're going to get more into inferencing later, but I want to be very clear that inferencing and predictions are two different things, and let's not get them confused. Okay. Think of predictions like a crystal ball. You know, you can see the future, make a prediction, who's going to win the World Series, or something like that. Okay? Predictions are about the future. Inferences are about the now. What's happening right now? Because I'm trying to put all these pieces together to figure it out. Okay? So today, we're going to focus on predictions. And as I read today, hope you can see this. As I read today, I want you to think about what will happen next. You're going to use your background knowledge or your schema. That's what your experiences have taught you, your personal experiences, and what you know about the book that I'm going to read, or what I will read as of the end of reading today, to help you make a prediction about what you think is going to happen next. So what you already know about the book and what you already know in your brain, your schema, your background knowledge, your experience, to help you come up with a prediction at the end of reading today. Okay? And then tomorrow I will finish the story. Yes, I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger today. But tomorrow I will finish the story, and then we'll talk about if our predictions matched how the story ends. Okay? All right. So I've got Bob, my buddy, and Bob is going to help me read to you. Remember, when Bob is lit, you're listening. You're not talking. You are just listening to the story and focusing on that. This is one of my very, very, very favorite books of all time. The illustrations are beautiful. It's called Pete and Pickles, and it's written by Berkeley Breathed. Okay? I'll try and show you the illustrations. They're just gorgeous as I'm reading them to you. You want to make your first prediction? What do you think this book is about? Just looking at the cover, think to yourself, it's a pig sitting on top of an elephant who is holding an umbrella, and he's maybe sailing? I don't know, paddling? What could this be about? Okay. Pete was a perfectly predictable pig. He was also a perfectly practical pig and a perfectly uncomplicated pig. Being all those perfect things, Pete might have run for the hills if he had known what was coming at night. So, what do you notice? What is Pete doing? He's vacuuming a grave, right? Okay, he's vacuuming a grave. He looks like a sad little pig. And he's vacuuming a grave. Can you see? Yeah. Okay. Already I'm starting to make some predictions. Are you? The storm arrived first. Pete cut the evening's fun off early and went to bed to get the nightmare out of the way. The same terrifying watery nightmare all pigs dream during stormy nights. For pigs are known for doing only one thing well in water. Drowning. And that is exactly what Pete dreamt he was doing when a sudden sound woke him. I think I'm going to move there. When a sudden sound woke him. The window was open. Pete pulled the lamp switch. Nothing happened. He had an odd feeling. Pigs are very smart in this way. That something was a little wrong. Can you see what's standing there? You see the elephant with the lampshade on his head? I'd say that's something wrong. Oomph! Pete was suddenly grabbed, hugged, really, by a wet nose at the other end of which was a wet elephant. The beast whispered, "Shh!" She said nothing else, but her eyes spoke clearly. "Help me." Then a knock at the door. A clown asked Pete if he had seen any sign of an escaped elephant named Pickles. "There, under the couch. Look carefully," Pete said, as the circus man led the sad, slumping elephant away. Pete was startled when she looked back at him and smiled. The next morning, Pete was disinfecting his house when he noticed his midnight visitor had left behind dandelions. "Ridiculous," thought Pete as he scrubbed. That afternoon, Pete took his usual stroll. He looked down at the evening mist rolling in and saw a circus tent. He looked at the dandelion. "Ridiculous," he muttered. Today, however, Pete would take a longer walk. He soon found himself amidst the circus tents, watching a long nose plucking every dandelion within reach. Pete knew that nose, and it knew him. It plucked Pete's hat and disappeared. Seconds before Pete called the police, his hat was pushed back out. improved. She put the dandelions on it. Oh, and look at the picture. I don't know if you guys can see it. I have to move Bob. So there is Pickles in a cage, sitting in the corner, all sad, and Pete standing outside the cage, just watching. I wonder what he's feeling. Pete looked in to see Pickles sitting in a very dark corner of a very dark tent, wearing a very locked chain. Pete suddenly, unexplainably, found himself reaching for the key. Now free and outside, Pickles dove to hide a while panicked Pete whispered, "Tea was not on my schedule today." Or, "Tea was on my schedule today, not elephants." Being a practical pig, however, he knew they needed a disguise. Something, anything. Pete thought fast. It worked too well. A policeman suggested dinner. Can you see? That is Pete, and Pickles is down below. And he thought she was a woman, so the police officer is asking her on a date. They reached Pete's house by nightfall. A weary Pickles retired after making herself comfortable in a pair of Pete's favorite pajamas. Understand this. You have not heard snoring until you've had an elephant nap on your couch. Pete was a perfectly unpleased pig. Tomorrow, he thought, the big girl leaves. And there they are. She's in his bed. He's sad by the window, contemplating, what have I done? What have I gotten myself into? Pete awoke the next day to find Pickles doing a little morning Tai Chi as if she were in China, which she certainly was not. On the other hand, Pete noted that his house guest had made a few changes to the grounds. This time, Pete did not say ridiculous. So if you notice, the changes that Pickles made, she planted dandelions on the grave. We still don't know who that is, but it's a picture of a female pig, and it says paprika. Now, I'm going to make an inference, because remember, inferencing is when we think about what's happening in the story now. So I'm not predicting anything about the future. I'm thinking about who could this be now? Who did Pete lose? Who is buried here? He keeps tending the grave. I think I'm going to make an inference based on what I know. He lives alone. He's all by himself. He seems like he's kind of older and curmudgeon-y. Maybe it was his wife. Maybe Pete lost his wife, and her name is Paprika. That is an inference. I'm not predicting about the future. I'm thinking about the now. Who is this? And how does she relate to him? Okay? Okay. Later that morning, Pete experienced the goose-pimply joy of a back scrubbing with his newspaper and coffee. He also discovered the limits of his bathtub. Pickles showed Pete a magazine article about high diving. She pointed to both of them. "Huh, ridiculous," Pete said. "Pigs and elephants sink like bricks." Pickles smiled. After lunch, they would swan dive off Niagara Falls. And they did, sort of. They're in a fountain. Can you see that? On Tuesday, they sledded down the Matterhorn in Switzerland. Sort of. Pete was learning that Pickles had lots of plans. On Sunday, they went to Tahiti for brunch. Pickles, as always, shared her tropical refreshments with the natives. See, she's feeding the dogs. After Paris, it was on to the lazy canals of Venice. Pete did not know any romantic Italian songs, which did not stop him from singing them. Pickles sniffed a fragrant Venetian lily and shared it with Pete in a manner nicely suited for elephants and pigs. She's blowing it right into his snout. It was when Pete returned home one evening he found ballet tryouts in Moscow. Soaring paracows over Tuscany and house painters on his roof, that his thoughts turned to his earlier life. A less complicated life, thought Pete. So he's thinking life was less crazy without Pickles. Soon after Pete discovered Pickles getting into things he shouldn't have been in, he stopped. Or he snapped. I'm sorry. I'm going to read that again. It's hard for me to see it. Soon after Pete discovered Pickles getting into things she shouldn't have been in, he snapped. It looks like maybe. Oh, I'm going to make an inference. That's Paprika, right? These are her things. She's the one whose grave Pete was tending to when she planted all the flowers. So Pickles is getting into Paprika's things, and I don't think Pete appreciates it. I am a predictable, practical, uncomplicated pig, or I was before, he yelled. As the shocked Pickles fell back into the bathtub, the last words she remembered hearing were the worst. It's time you probably left. Something broke. A pipe gushed water in a spewing torrent. The house filled while a panicky Pete screamed, "Pickles! The mop! Buckets! Sponges! Never mind! Head up for higher ground!" Pete worried that the high ground would run out, and as a matter of fact, it did. And when all the snouts and snoots in the now flooded house were fully stretched to their furthest reach, only one had found the refuge of sweet air. Pete clung tightly to the last open window. He looked back down into the face of one far too heavy to join him, and noticed once again, as always, a smile. So Pete's in the window. Pickles is under the water, and she's looking up at Pete, smiling. Make your prediction. What do you think is going to happen next? Okay? You have lots of background of the story. I've read a good part of it. Use your schema, your background knowledge about maybe being underwater, floods, friendship. What would you do? Make your prediction and be ready to share tomorrow.